For the ones who get it done, the most important part is the one you need now. And the best partner is the one who can deliver. That's why millions of maintenance and repair pros trust Grainger, because we have professional-grade supplies for every industry, even hard-to-find products. And we have same-day pickup and next-day delivery on most orders. But most importantly, we have an unwavering commitment to help keep you up and running. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Hey, warmer from the low. Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VC Family Podcast. We'll be joined in about a minute or so by Paul Fritschner. He does great work over at the Big East Digital Network. We'll talk about what moves these Big East teams have made that have been of impact, how wild it currently is in the transfer portal, and some of the coaching moves that have been made this offseason that are of impact. I've been doing a lot of two-part podcasts, and this will be another one of them because I do want to be reserving a little bit of time for the questions that you do have on this podcast and haven't been getting too many over the last few weeks. I think most of it is because you guys are wondering what the heck is happening with regards to 200 million billion guys being in the transfer portal and just the lack of clarity that we have right now. But that said, if you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, please do fire that in one of two ways. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @unit_D1. Keep in mind, large ZM, the name does not matter. So per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And then in the final segment, we will stir up and sum up all the news and notes we saw in college basketball over the last 24 hours. And everything is powered by Edge Boost. Over at Edge Boost, they make sure that bettors, they're able to receive their funds 24/7, 365 in any manner that they are looking to do so, as because it's not running on credit or anything like that. This is an account that you just pretty much fund, and when you do go to edgeboost.bet and you do type in the promo code of Greg, Greg, your first $25 deposit, that is going to be matched dollar for dollar by Edge Boost, so they're doing a rock solid job there, and we do have ourselves a great podcast coming up with our good friend Paul Fritschner, because he does great work over at the Big East Digital Network. He was doing the Sean Miller podcast before. Obviously, Sean is no longer there, so we will see what sort of goodies we have with Mr. Richard Pitino, but he's doing a great job on that front. I know he does a podcast that he's going to be talking about called The Rebound that he's going to mention at the end as well, as he's doing a great job just all 12 months out of the year. Just taking a look at this great game of college basketball, and to be able to follow Paul on Twitter/X. That is at his first and last name, Paul Fritschner, and that is the last name spelled Fristchner. And Paul, always great to get you aboard. Thank you.
Oh, it's always great to be here with you, Greg. Let's do it.
Absolutely. And Paul, it has been a very rambunctious offseason. I mean, it's hard to believe that it's been less than 3.5 weeks since the Nets were cut down in San Antonio. And just what have you made out of everything that we've seen over the last few weeks with 100 million billion guys entering the transfer portal, 100 million billion guys getting paid, and right now all these rosters just seemingly looking completely different from what they were a few weeks ago?
Yeah, I think the overall image to me of college basketball right now is that the sport will figure a lot of this out, I think, Greg. I think there are a lot of components to what's happening right now that need to be decided, right? You need to figure out what's happening in the transfer portal. You need to figure out what's happening with NIL. And I'm talking from a legislative perspective, not just micro this year. I'm talking from a macro perspective on what needs to happen to get things under control. But I think when you look at the transfer portal and NIL, and you're starting to see this kind of evolve in the national narrative more and more, I think college basketball, from a product standpoint, is in a great place. When you turn on a random college basketball game, especially at the high level, you're getting a pretty high quality product because a lot of these players are more incentivized to come back to school as opposed to going into the NBA or going overseas or whatever it might be. They want to come back to school because they can earn more money than they might have been able to earn elsewhere. What we need to figure out is how the fans can stay engaged from a retention standpoint, just from the idea of what we're used to seeing with guys staying in school for 4 years or longer.
Yep, I agree with you. I do think that things do need to get figured out because I do think that guys need to get paid and everything like that. We don't need to be in the era where you were giving peanut butter to someone for their free bagel and you were getting a violation for that. That was absolutely ridiculous back in the day. But certainly I do think that it's going to be interesting to see how things get legislated, because I think that the biggest gripe for a lot of people is that these guys stay at a school for a year and then they hop from school to school to school. They're playing at like 5 schools in 5 years. And do you think that there could be perhaps a time where we do see like 2-year contracts get built in and we we do see multi-year agreements, because I do think that that's what a lot of people are calling for.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's pretty close down the line. Well, I say pretty close. I think that that's something that's being talked about. Now, how close it is to actually materializing, I don't know, Greg, but I think that there's going to come a point where you have to be contractually obligated to staying somewhere for longer than a year, I think. Because nowhere else in professional sports, and let's just call it like it is, college sports are professional sports now, nowhere else around the world, at least to my knowledge, can you play at a different team for one season and then the next season change teams and then change teams and then change teams. That just doesn't happen anywhere. It has to start happening.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. The only way that you find that is on some of these quarterbacks from time to time. They keep on signing the franchise tender and everything like that, but I mean, it's very, very rare when you find that happening. So I'm right there with you. It's Paul Fritschner, who does great work over at the Big East Digital Network. He also does great work with Xavier Sports in general, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And how about if we do dive in on the Big East? Because I feel like they've been one of the bigger winners here in the offseason. We haven't seen some of these teams make absolutely rambunctious moves, but as we know, with Xavier, they in the offseason did a nice job of being able to hire on the younger Patino. He's brought in there a relatively nice squad. Villanova's made some wholesale changes. They made some nice moves in the transfer portal as well. You know that UConn is going to be retooling this offseason as well. Just what have you made out of a conference in the Big East that, as we know, in this day and age of NIL, without having football, I think that that's helped them stick so many resources this offseason into getting guys in the transfer portal.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the way that Xavier attacked this roster going into next season, I'm very interested to see not only what next season looks like, Greg, but what it looks like 2 seasons from now, 3 seasons from now, because there's clearly an eye from Richard Pitino. There's clearly an eye on development. You're taking multiple players here that have 2 to 3 years of eligibility. Sure, you have a couple of guys that have 1 year of eligibility, but for the most part, you're taking players that are going to be around this program for a little while. And because of that, you're building for the future. You're not necessarily putting all your chips in the middle of the table for next season. So I'm very curious to see what it looks like in 2 years. As far as next season goes, they took a chance on some players that I think at the mid-major level had really talented freshman seasons. Gabriel Pizzato is one of those. Really, really good season at Evansville this year. I want to see how his game translates to the next level. Malik Moore is somebody that doesn't have much eligibility remaining. This is just his only year at Xavier. But he's somebody coming out of the Big West from Montana, a talented guard, can shoot the ball. What does Xavier get out of somebody like that? How well do all of their games translate to the Big East level? Because Anthony Robinson is the only player that's played at a high major level that is going to be on next year's team, because Rodney Anderson, who is the only player that Xavier retained, he didn't play this year. He was a redshirt. As far as that goes, playing in the ACC, Anthony Robinson, albeit in limited minutes for Virginia, is the only quote-unquote high major talent that Xavier has.
Yep, I think that is very interesting to point out there, as we do have quite a few mid-major guys coming up, but it does feel very similar to what Xavier did under Sean Miller as well. Granted, Sean Miller did a nice job of being able to mix and match, but I feel like there were a lot of guys that were able to step up, like a Davion McKnight that was over at Western Kentucky over the last few seasons, was able to do a nice job for this team. I know that they brought in Traore, and that didn't necessarily work out for them, but he was a guy that I really liked coming over from Long Beach State as well, and I do think that there's a very clear track record of success for guys that were very good at the mid-major level / a little bit of a smaller school and being able to come into the Big East right away and having immediate success.
Yeah, no doubt about it. When you talk about some of those names like Traore, I was very intrigued by Traore coming into this past season, but he got injured. He tore his ACL. Now he goes down to Texas. We'll never know what he would have looked like in a Xavier uniform, against other competition, not just his own team in practice. I think the way that this team is now structured, you're going to start seeing that where, like I mentioned before, it's development. It's looking for the future. It's guys that really succeeded at the mid-major level. You mentioned Davion McKnight. Guys that really, I think, can move up and succeed.
Yep, that is such a big key there, and I'm not sure how you take a look at things, but I do feel like it's a little bit easier for the guards to be able to move up rather than the big men, because when you do have a big man, I think that it takes a little bit longer for them to get used to the physicality of more of a power conference level sort of style of competition rather than going at a low / mid-major, especially these guys that come from the D2 level to the D1 level. I always notice that the big men typically have a little bit more difficulty. Would you agree with that, or have you noticed that perhaps there is a little bit more of a path pathway for these big men to have the same success that a lot of these guards have been having?
Well, I think there's pressure on the big men to translate to the next level because they're the most coveted players in the portal, right? It feels like college basketball is a guard-oriented game. So if you can shoot at one level, you can shoot generally at the next level. But how does your game translate when you're a big man? I think rebounding translates in a big way. That's one of the big things that, if you can rebound at one level, you can rebound at pretty much all levels. So that's what I would say, where a lot of these big men, they might be able to, at the lower levels, get away with some things where maybe their footwork's a little slower, but because they're taller, they can recover and block a shot against a player that's not as athletic. Can they do that at the high major level against a player who will make them pay for those kinds of mistakes? That's where the big men get separated when you start talking about the high major conferences.
I think that that's very well said, as we do have Paul Fritschner, who does great work over at the Big East Digital Network, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And how about if we do dive in a little bit further on that topic? Who do you think are a few schools that have done a good job of being able to bring in big men here in the offseason? Because I think that an obvious one is Michigan, when you're bringing a guy like a Yaxel Lendeborg, who is so good over at UAB, and just the way that we have seen Dusty May be able to develop his guys. He was able to do a great job with the Twin Towers last year over at Michigan. I think that that's certainly one that is good to be on everyone's top five. But are there a few other schools that you take a look at and you feel like they just brought in some good guard, they brought in some good depth down low, they brought in some good forwards that you're very intrigued to see?
I'm trying to think here of some guards. Well, Michigan, for me, you talked about Landenborg, you talked about that. I'm really intrigued to see what happens in the Big East with UConn and St. John's, because I think St. John's reloaded in a massive way this year, Greg. And then you look at between UConn and St. John's, just some of the absolute studs that these teams are bringing in. Alex Caravan is coming back for UConn, but just all over the place. UConn and St. John's, and also Creighton too. Nick Graves, Josh Dix, Jackson McAndrews coming back, Jason Green, but then Owen Freeman as well. They just added Blake Harper. And UConn, you have Silas Demery and Solo Ball's coming back. Braylon Mullins, a talented freshman. You get Malachi Smith as a bench piece from Dayton. Just think those two teams, UConn and Creighton, at the top of the Big East, along with St. John's, where you have Ian Jackson, Uzziah Sellers, Bryce Hopkins transfers from Providence, Dylan Mitchell transfers from Cincinnati. Oh, by the way, Zuby Ejiofor is back. Right? Ruben Prey is back. All of those things combined, I think, are massive additions for the Big East. And the top end of the Big East, which has, say, you want more depth in the Big East than we've seen lately. I think the top end of the Big East has been great. What kind of depth does the Big East have is the big question mark. But the top end of the Big East looks great.
Yes, it certainly does. And I do think that that top end of the Big East, it is going to be very much back in full force. But I do have this question for you, because we did see a little bit of a bottoming out with regards to some of these Big East teams. Like Seton was right there at the bottom this year. It was relatively rough for them. I expected a little bit more out of Butler. I expected a little bit more out of Providence. How do you take a look at some of those lower teams? Because I do think that DePaul, who has been miserable for a very long time, has been able to build something. I feel like Georgetown, even though it was a little bit less than savory at the back half of the season, they made some steps in the right direction. I like what Butler has done here in the transfer portal as well. So I even think that the bottom half of the league has really been able to upgrade and has been able to do a nice job here in the offseason too.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, you look at Butler, like you said, Finley Bizjak's coming back. Michael Ajayi transfers in. I believe they got Jalen Jackson as well. So, they do have some talent coming to Butler this year. So you look at the depth of the conference, that's certainly something that we'll be looking at going forward.
No doubt, as we do have Paul Fritschner, who does great work over at the Big East Digital Network, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And certainly one of the most impactful coaching ads this offseason was over there at Xavier. I do think that bringing in Richard Pitino, that was a really good move. And now we get to see Pitino on Pitino crime twice a year, perhaps 3 times a year. That is going to be absolutely tremendous for all involved, and that's going to be some good, clean family fun. But when you take a look at some of these other coaching moves, what are a few other ones that stand out to you and you just feel like it's going to work out and that the program is going to be able to elevate under their new coach?
I would say, looking around the rest of the country, Kevin Willard is somebody that sticks out to me coming back to the Big East, right? He's somebody that's very familiar with the Big East landscape. Will Wade going to NC State is a name that really sticks out to me. I think Ryan Odom is going to move up well. He's just continually progressed to the high major level now at UVA. And then one other name that I'm keeping an eye on is Nico Medved at Minnesota, because Minnesota is traditionally a really hard job to win at. Nico Medved, familiar with Minnesota, He's going to Minnesota, trying to take over a program to have some sustained success there. I'm really interested to see how he does. I think that's a great hire for the Golden Gophers.
Oh, I'm so with you there. And just how have you taken a look at the Big Ten in general? Because I know that you're out there in more of the Midwest part of the country, over there at Cincinnati, pretty much a crossroads of the Midwest and the South, if I were to say so myself. But how have you taken a look at the way that the Big Ten, in my opinion, has just evolved as a conference? Because it felt like for the longest time that the Big Ten was very much stuck in their ways. Nobody was utilizing the transfer portal. Everyone was ranked like 300th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, except for Iowa under Frank McCaffrey. And felt like everyone was just playing methodical basketball from the 1980s. But I feel like over the last 24 months, we've seen very much a culture shift in terms of the Big Ten. And we've noticed a lot of programs, for lack of a better term, getting with the program.
The other one, too, you talk about some programs upgrading. Indiana, right? I mean, Indiana's the name where you go from Mike Woods. You're just trying to break the mold at Indiana, where you went with Mike Woodson, somebody who's very familiar with the program. Now Darian DeVries leaves West Virginia and goes to Indiana after only a year there. You would talk about building a program, Greg, and to answer your question, like, can you build that program at Indiana, who is so desperate for a winner?
Oh, I'm right there with you. And I also think that the man that is going to be going on over to Iowa, Ben McCollum, is going to be very intriguing as well, because I absolutely love that hire. And I think that he's going to be able to have some immediate success with that program, too.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt about it.
And then I do want to just ask you about that as well, because we have seen Ben McCollum be a relatively nice fast riser in terms of college basketball as well. Would you be surprised if we do see more of these like D2 guys, because that's where Ben McCollum was just 14 or so months ago, being able to get an opportunity, because it feels like all these schools are rolled the dice on them, whether that be a Cal State Northridge out there in the Big West. As we know, Josh Schertz, when he was over at Indiana State, now at St. Louis, he started out at the D2 ranks. Do you think that we could see more of these guys coming? Because I was a little bit surprised this offseason that we didn't see more of these D2 guys get a shot at the Division I level.
No, I think you're right. And looking at Iowa and their hire of Ben McCollum, right, his skill set as a coach has translated at every level. He comes up, he spends with a 1 year at Drake. They play at the slowest pace in the country. It's kind of funny watching Iowa basketball now pretty much mirror Iowa football as far as that grind it down, this slow pace type of style offensively, that their fans are very used to on the gridiron. Now it translates over to the college basketball hardwood. In general, I think when you look at how these coaches can translate up, I don't have a ton of examples in front of me to speak off the top of my head outside of McCollum that I know I'm just blanking on right now. I think overall the way that college basketball is being run, even when you look at some of the NBA assistants, Greg, that are coming down to coach in the college ranks because it's becoming so similar with the salary and everything else that these players are getting, college basketball is attracting a lot of talent right now from the coaching ranks. And it's, again, only great for the game.
Yep, I'm right there with you. And what Andy Newman's been able to do at Cal State Northridge, I take a look at Cal Poly, and they bring in pretty much a Colorado Mesa coaching staff as well. I look at those guys as well, and they've been able to do a nice job. And I do think that going forward, we're going to see more of that. Just like we're going to see a lot of you this offseason, Paul. I know that you do great work over at the Big East Digital Network. I know you're getting things squared away over there at Xavier as well, because back when Sean Miller was on campus, you guys had the Sean Miller podcast. I know that you guys are going to be doing great things with the new regime that's in there with Mr. Richard Pitino and company. So let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people are able to follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, absolutely, Greg. I appreciate you having me on as always. I do a daily podcast during the season called The Rebound Rundown. That show will air every once in a while throughout the offseason. I'd say once every couple of weeks. I'm going to try to do some interviews, have people on here and there to just kind of keep everybody updated on the sport, especially in the Midwest area. So it's called The Rebound Rundown. You can check it out on audio platforms and on YouTube, and you can just follow me at my name, Paul Fritschner, on social media.
And Paul is doing an absolutely tremendous job taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. And every single time he joins me, learns such great insights. So big thanks to Paul for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And coming up next, let's round up all the news and notes we saw in college basketball over the last 24 hours.
If you work in quality control at a candy factory, you know strict safety regulations come with the job. It's why you partner with Grainger. Grainger helps you find the high-quality and compliant products your business needs to inspect, detect, and help correct issues. And the sweetest part is, everyone gets a product that's as safe to eat as it is delicious. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. It is always great to be joined by Paul Fritschner. He does great work over at the Big East Digital Network. He does so much amazing work over with Xavier and so much more. Every single time he joins me, he lends such great insights and did so once again today. So big thanks to Paul for joining me in the live segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you a recap of all the news and notes that we saw in college basketball over the last 24 hours. Silently, Tulsa is putting together a really nice transfer class as they're going to be bringing in Terrence Biltford Tough Jr. on over from Arkansas State. Arkansas State was a rock-solid defense, and with Mr. Ford, he was a nice point guard. 9 points, just under 5 assists, 1.2 steals per contest. He was able to shoot darn near 40% from three-point range this past season, and for Tulsa, it has been rough under Eric Conkle, to say the least. So, they are in need of just any sort of positivity whatsoever. But that said, with this Tulsa bunch, I really do like what they've done in the transfer portal, albeit they're going to have to replace a lot of guys from last season. So they did need to add a lot of pieces via the transfer portal. It's probably going to take them a little bit of time to be able to get their bearings about them and to be able to get that chemistry. But that said, this is just the latest of the pieces that they brought in. Miles Barnes-Sable, he comes in as a nice double-figure scorer from St. Thomas. Miles Rigsby was a rock-solid defender over at Troy. Dorian Ochienekwa, he comes in as a big man from Georgia Tech. So all in all, I really do like what this Tulsa team is doing, and I do like that pickup for them. And I do like this pickup as well. Babakar Diallo, he was over at UMKC this last year. 7.5 points, 3.5 assists, a little bit over a steal per contest. 6'6", a little bit of a do-it-all sort of guy. He's heading on over to High Point. So High Point, the rich just continue to get richer, and this team, it feels like it's Noah's Ark. They've got pretty much two of everything at this point, and I do think that High Point is very much going to be terrorizing the Big South this year. Now, we have seen the Big South really be able to do a better job of spending money. Even the schools like Charleston Southern are starting to be able to get in on the act, but that said, for this High Point team, you bring in Vincent Brady II, who was a rock-solid scorer over at Missouri State. Cameron Fletcher is an upside guy that comes over from Xavier. They retain Jace Johnson, who is a really nice three-point shooter for them. They bring in Conrad Martinez, who I recognize they didn't see a lot of playing time, but that was a man that was in the Arizona backcourt 8 seasons ago. Scotty Washington was a rock-solid scorer over at Cal State Northridge, aka CSUN. So, you just go down the list. They've done a really good job of checking all the boxes here in the transfer portal, and I think that that's a really good add for them. Milton Matthews, he has decided that he is going to be going to ETSU, East Tennessee State, and this guy was great. Over at Florida A&M last season, he was able to supply the team with just under 15 points per contest, shot 37% from three-point range. He was one of the highest volume three-point shooters in all of college basketball, and that's been the big thing for ETSU. 2 seasons ago, this was one of the lesser three-point shooting teams in all of college basketball. They decided that they need to get a little bit more versatile. They need to pop it and lock it a little bit more from three-point range. They've done a good job of being able to address that. And for ETSU, this team has done a very good job of adding some pieces here in the portal. Jalen Smith was a nice point guard over at North Florida this past season. He's coming in. Brian Taylor II is a really good three-point shooter. He's able to give you some rebounding at 6'4". He's coming in. Blake Barkley wasn't able to see a lot of minutes over at Northwestern, but he comes in from Northwestern, and overall, very impressed by ETSU. I feel like they could maybe use like 1 or 2 more big men, so that way they're able to maintain their just great rebounding that they always have. But all in all, I do love what they're able to bring to the table. Devin Ade, he was over at Central Connecticut this last season, 14 points per contest, a little bit over a steal and a half per contest. He has decided that he is going to be going on over to South Florida. This just feels like a Brian Hodgins sort of guy. Now, he did play at a little bit of a slower tempo team in Central Connecticut, and I do expect that Brian Hodgson is going to be running some tempo here at South Florida, but that said, this is a guy that's able to guard multiple positions. At 6'5", he's got really good versatility, and for this South Florida team, after just a really, really unfortunate year this last year, you just hope for absolutely nothing but the best for all those guys involved in this program. It does feel like they're getting their bearings about them. Feels like they're doing a really nice job of adding some nice pieces. Xavier Brown, nice double-figure scorer over at James Madison is coming in. There's a few guys that are going to be following Hodgson on over from Arkansas State, and Isaiah Nelson along Joseph Pignon as well. Damian Collins has a lot of upside. He comes in from LSU. Really like the class that they're putting together right now, and I do like what this team has been able to put together as well. You've got meet for the Roadrunners. Cal State Bakersfield bringing in Ronald Jessamy, who he last season was able to give the team right around about 9 points, 6 boards at 6'8", shot darn near 60% from the floor. He's able to give you a little bit north of a block per contest. This is what Bakersfield needed, in my opinion. Last year, I just felt like they got a little bit too far away from their defensive identity. You could tell that things were a little bit wobbly on that end, and being able to bring in a guy like a Jessamy, I think is a step in, being able to, for lack of a better term, restore the roar with regards to this team. Now, it is a Bakersfield team that certainly I think that they're going to need to add a few more pieces. They're going to be bringing in A.J. George, who did begin his career over at Long Beach State many, many years ago, and they've also got Dalian Smith coming over from Alabama A&M, but this is very much a move that I like, and I do think that this team is starting to be able to get back to those roots, and I do think that this is going to be very successful for them moving forward. In ETSU, they were not done on Tuesday. They also added Cam Morris on over from UMass Lowell, guy that was able to give the team 8.5 points, 4.5 boards. Some really good versatility over here with Morris, not necessarily going to be like a three-point shooting dynamo or anything like that, but he's a guy that is able to contribute on both the offensive side of things and the defensive side of things. And for Morris last season when he was over with UMass Lowell, and certainly did leave something to be desired with his three-point shooting. Last year shot just 25% from three, but at 6'8", he's going to be able to guard multiple positions. I think that was another really nice add for ETSU. I thought that this was a solid add for James Madison. Eli Wilborn, a little bit of a do-it-all player. Last season over at Duquesne, he was able to log for the team about 5 points, 3.5 boards, block per contest. He was also at St. Francis of Pennsylvania, where he was a little bit more of a go-to scorer. He has been added to James Madison. This roster, I feel like, just very much fits more of the Preston Spradlin style. I felt like he was a little bit of a fish out of water to begin the season last year over at James Madison, because it felt like he didn't have quite the defensive style of team that he typically was accustomed to when he was over at Morehead State, what have you. Now I feel like they really have been able to find that sort of just happy medium with regards to that, because he is probably going to need to play a little bit more offense than his teams did when he was over at Morehead State. That said, I do think that he's doing a good job of just being able to mix and match, being able to add a lot of these guys. I do think that James Madison very much on the up and up for the upcoming season, as I do feel like they've done a good job just having some shrewd adds, as they also added Paul Lewis and Paul Jones, so a pair of Pauls as well. So do think that they have a little bit of work left to do, but so far so good for them. This one I think is pretty good as well. You've got Leonardo Batil. He was over at Abilene Christian this last season, averaged 13 points per contest, was like one of the lone guys 2 seasons ago that was able to shoot it from three-point range. He has decided that he's going to be going to UMass. He's a 6'8" versatile piece, and I think that he's going to be able to fit very well in this Frank Martin style for UMass last season. They just needed more offense. The defense was honestly relatively solid, but with being able to add in their Marcus Banks Jr. on over from UMBC as well, they're doing a good job of addressing this. They are probably going to need to get a little bit more size down low, but I think that that's a step in the right direction. Tennessee taking a step in the right direction as well. They have been at their best when they've been able to get go-to scorers, and Amari Abraham, he last season was over at Louisiana Tech, did begin his career over at Ole Miss, so he's familiar with the SEC. Last season over at the lower level over at Louisiana Tech, 12.5 points, steal and a half per contest, shot 37.5% from three. He gets added to the roster. And for Tennessee, because they are going to be missing their main guys from a season ago, you no longer have Chaz Lanier, you no longer have Zakai Ziegler. It's going to be a little bit of passing of the torch with regards to backcourt. They still need to find that dynamo scorer, because they bring in Jacoby Gillespie along Jalen Carey. These are rock solid ads, but I don't know if they necessarily have that guy like a Chaz Lanier, like a Dalton Connect from past seasons. But adding Abraham, I think he's a nice depth piece, guy that's able to come in off the bench, be able to drain a few threes. Very good ad for them. Dean Albury last year spent the season over at Utah State, really wasn't able to get out on the floor as much as he had at Queens NC when he was at Queens NC 2 seasons ago. 17 points, 3.5 assists per contest. This past year, he was still relatively solid, though. Chipped in there about 8 points. He was able to give out just under 2 assists per contest. He's decided that he is going to New Mexico, so this is a really good ad for a New Mexico team that I like what they've done given the circumstances. Obviously, losing Richard Pitino, that's a little bit of a tough pill to swallow, but they hire on one of the better young up-and-coming coaches in all of college basketball, and Eric Olin, who I thought did a really good job the past few seasons over at UC San Diego, took them from the Division II ranks to the Division I ranks. This is a guy that is able to be very versatile. Not an amazing shooter, but he's a solid shooter. And for this New Mexico team, they obviously are going to be bringing over a few guys from the great state of California, and Kevin Penn, along with Khalil Penn, and I do think that Chris Howell coming on over from UC San Diego, along with Miluz Vsudvich, hopefully I said that correct, that is going to be rock solid. JT Rock, the 7'1" big man coming over from Iowa State, is big as well, so this team is going to have much more size than the UC San Diego team. I think that he's a solid fit with regards to the style of defense that Olin is looking to play as well, so I did take a look at this, and I'm very encouraged by it. Casey Nabikwe. Hopefully I said that correct. He was over at Washington this past season, just was unable to get out there on the floor. He played in 12 games, and season before at Oregon State, it's not like he was anything amazing. He averaged about 5 points, a block per contest at 6'10". He has decided that he is going down to Pacific at this lower level. I think that he's going to be able to see some solid minutes, and I think that he could be a good big man for Pacific. I don't think that he's going to be anything dominant, but with Pacific addressing the backcourt the way that they have Alexis Marmaiolis coming on over from Lamar, Jaden Clayton, a nice double-figure scorer from Maine, Dom Capriati, guy that has shown that he's able to shoot it from 3. I think that this is a good ad, makes him a little bit more well-rounded, and Dave Smart here in season number 2, I do think that he's going to be able to get things rocking and rolling. And how about UT Arlington trying to get things rocking and rolling in terms of bringing back someone? Rayshawn Semester. He last season gave the team 11.5 points per contest. He was a nice go-to guy towards back half of the season. At 6'8", he had some versatility, and he's able to pop it a little bit from three-point range. Not necessarily a guy that you want to be trusting in to really be giving you too much from three-point range, but he did shoot about 34% from the outside. He does need to work on that 48% free throw shooting, but that's at him coming back to UT Arlington. That's big, and that's stuff that we need to be reporting upon more, because while we all love these transfer portal ads and everything like that, the guys that are coming back are big, and with Miles Rigsby going on over to UT Arlington as well, I think that they're building a nice foundation, and having a guy that's familiar with the system, I think that that is going to be pretty massive for them. I don't know if this is necessarily anti-quotes here massive, but I do think that this is a relatively solid ad, as well as you've got Mr. Jamie Vincent. He was over at Texas this last season, just was unable to get out there on the floor, but as a guy that at 6'11" has some upside, he has decided that he is going to Texas A&M, and I think that it's very interesting what Bucky McMillan has been doing, because he was playing Bucky ball when he was over at Sam Amford, having a lot of guys with just quick twitches, having a lot of guys that were just playing positionless basketball, and he's actually brought in quite a few big men here in the offseason. And for Vincent, if you look at his recruiting profile, he was coming out during the class of 2024. He was more of a top 200 guy, not necessarily a guy that you thought was going to be like absolutely tremendous or anything at Texas, and I wasn't surprised when he was glued to the bench or anything like that, but being able to go on to Texas A&M where you can possibly see some minutes, I think that that's big for him. And for A&M, they've done a very solid job of being able to add some of these guys. So you bring in Mackenzie Mbakbo, who does have that versatility coming in from Indiana. I was talking about the big man that they bring in, Zach Clemens. He's going to be coming on over from Kansas. So I do think that it's a very intriguing bunch. They have some solid shooting that they are adding as well. So all in all, I do like the moves that Texas A&M is making, and I do think that there's going to be a lot of upside here. And I do think that there's going to be a lot of upside when it comes to this man as well. As you saw, J.R. Konzinski, he was over at Notre Dame this last season. He was averaging about 4.5 points per contest 2 seasons ago. He was able to put in there right around about 4.5 rebounds per game, 7.5 points per contest. He has decided that he is going to be going to Florida Gulf Coast, and with Dunk City, they were one of the more efficient offenses in all of college basketball. They play a very slow and controlled style, much like Notre Dame did this past season. So I think that this is going to be a relatively solid fit. And for Kaczynski, 2 seasons ago when he was averaging those 7.5 points per contest, he was shooting in the neighborhood about 33% from 3. Not amazing, but you know what? At 6'6", it lends some good versatility out there in the Atlantic Sun. I think that this is a solid pickup for them. I also think that this is a solid pickup as well. Josh Harris, he last season was over at North Florida. He was averaging 13.5 points, 7 boards, mid-30s three-point shooter at 6'8". He's able to space out the floor. He has decided that he is going to be going to Indiana. It just feels like Indiana is doing things right, because with the Hoosiers, it's been a rough last few seasons for them. They just need any sort of positivity whatsoever. They have been really stuck in the mud for a very long time. This is a very, very valued program. This is many people are going to call them blue blood of a sport, and you know what? They just haven't lived up to that over the last 20 or so years, and being able to just get these guys in that have some versatility, that have some upside, I think that that's very big for them, as he's going to be teamed up with Josiah Miles as well. So you've got 2 guys from North Florida. They're heading on over there. Connor Enright, who did a nice job building things out over at DePaul, he's going to be entering as well. For Indiana, they've went with a little bit less flash. They obviously bring in Tucker DeVries. That's an obvious one, but they're going with a lot of these mid-major guys that were able to win, that were able to show some nice promise. So I do like what they're doing there, and I do think that it's going to lead to some good results moving forward. You do have a pair of guys that decided to go to Sam Amford. They lost their coach in the offseason, but they're still looking to have some guys that are going to be rock solid on offense, as Cade Norris. He was over at Illinois State this last season. He only gave the team right around about 1.5 points per contest, but he's a guy that had some upside with regards to his three-point shooting. And then Keaton Norris, that is his brother. He is more of the valued guy, comes in from Wright State, 7.5 points on about 44% three-point shooting. They have both decided that they are going to be going to Samford, so Samford's still looking to play in, shall we say, the vein of what they have over the last few seasons, and I do think that that's a good pickup for them. You've got Ty Dunn, who led off college basketball in terms of turnovers last season, but was a nice guy that was able to dole out the ball last season with 5.3 assists, 12.5 points, steal and a half per contest. He has decided that he is going to be going to UC San Diego. As we know, UC San Diego looking to turn over a new leaf, though. They are going to be sticking with much of the same coaching staff from a season ago. Eric Olin is gone, but they went with pretty much a coach in waiting / they went with one of the top assistants to be able to fill that role. He's going to be teamed up with Trap Johnson, who's going to be coming on over from Montana State as well. They haven't had a lot of size here in the portal, and for UC San Diego, they are going to have quite a few holes to fill. This is a good one, though, and this is a guy that if they can get Mr. Ty Dunn to be a little bit more efficient with the ball, I do think that there's going to be some upside there. I think that there is some upside with this one as well. As you saw, Mr. Braxton Bayless, who was over at Western Kentucky last season, he was able to give the team about 8 points per contest. He was at Niagara 2 seasons ago, where he was more of an 11.5 point per game scorer. He's decided that he's going to go to Little Rock. Little Rock really played some nice defense last season, but they had pretty much two go-to scorers, and then they didn't have a whole heck of a lot else. For Little Rock, they're looking to be able to build a little bit more depth this season. Bayless is a perfect guy for that, and Bayless is a really nice three-point shooter as well. So Little Rock was very hit or miss in terms of their overall shooting. He was able to shoot. Mr. Bayless was 43.5% from three-point range a season ago, so I do think that this is going to be a solid add for them, and for Little Rock, we shall see what else they're going to be able to do moving forward, as they've been a little bit slow in the transfer portal, but this is a bunch that they really made a lot of their adds late in the transfer portal last season. We'll see if they're going to be looking to take the same approach, because the gambles that they did take late last season, they were able to pay off, and they paid off in droves. So this is their first, probably quite a few guys that they're going to be adding on. You saw Jalen Shelley, who he was over at USC last season, a 6'8" big man that just really didn't see too much playing time whatsoever, decide that he is going to be going to Loyola Marymount. We have seen Loyola Marymount swing on some of these guys that were highly touted guys that just didn't see a lot of minutes. Some of them have panned out, some of them have not. You saw over the last, I would say, year or two, they went with more of the proven guys, and it was iffy, but this is a former top 100 prospect that stands 6'8". He's able to give you a little bit down low. He's able to pop it a bit from three-point range. I do think that this is a solid add for a program that is looking for a little bit more explosiveness in general, and if you want to talk about explosiveness, how about adding LJ Thomas, who was over at Austin Peay this last season. He was able to give them a little bit of everything. 14 points, 4 assists, a steal per contest. Now, did not shoot it well from three-point range, and Old Dominion was a squad that they did not have a lot of three-point shooting last season, but Old Dominion has already addressed that, because along with Mr. Thomas coming on over, they've got a lot of guys that were very rock solid with regards to their overall shooting a season ago to be able to pair with them. So this is not going to be like what we saw with Austin Peay a season ago, as Old Dominion is also going to be bringing in someone like a Jordan Battle, who was over at Coastal Carolina last season. Jared Turner was relatively solid over at Northeastern as well. Still probably going to be a team that does struggle a little bit from the outside, especially with Casey Shaw coming on over from Maryland Eastern Shore, but I do like the backcourt that this team is building, and they were very rock solid down low a season ago as well. If you want to talk about rock solid as well, this I think is a very much rock solid move, as you do see Bold Dinguet. I was just talking about UC San Diego a few minutes ago. He has decided that he is going to be going to UC San Diego. He was able to average about 4 boards, 7.5 points, and he's got versatility. He shot 38% from three-point range. Not a guy that was necessarily heralded, because, well, let's call it what it is. This was a rough season, to say the least, for Portland, but should be able to step in right away and make a nice contribution, and this should be a nice contribution as well. How about Seton Hall actually picking up a guy that might be able to shoot? AJ Stan McCray, he last season was over at Miami. Logged for the team a little bit over 7 points and a steal per contest, and while he was over with Sam Iamford, he was a rock solid player 2 seasons ago, where he was averaging about 11.5 points per contest, was one of the more underrated defenders, in my opinion, in all of college basketball, where he was generating about 1.6 steals per contest. He has decided that he is going to be going on over to Seton Hall, a team that desperately needs anyone that's able to shoot from three. Now, I'm not going to call him amazing from three-point range, but when he was over at Samford 2 seasons ago, he was shooting 41% from three. This past year at Miami, he shot 32.5% from three-point range. That was a Miami team that was not good in terms of their offense, in terms of their defense, in terms of anything whatsoever, and with the way that Seton Hall was shooting, that is very much an upgrade for them, because I think that Greg Peterson at this point might be an upgrade for them, and I can't even shoot worth a lick, but that's it for the Seton Hall team. They are looking to be able to put a little bit of something together. Adam Clark, Josh Rivera are also both coming on over to be able to help out the roster. TJ Simpkins, the non-shooters of the Simpkins brothers, are also in as well, so it's looking like Seton Hall is once again perhaps going to be in sort of the same mold that they have been in past years, but I do like that pickup for them, and that will be able to allow them to be rock solid defensively. And then you had Seton Hall lose a guy in Emmanuel Okafor. He has decided that he is going to be going to Wichita State. He played for Louisville, saw limited minutes there this past season. He was averaging about 2.5 points, 2.5 rebounds per game while he was over at Seton Hall as well. So it's going to be interesting to see if he's going to be able to live up to that billing, because we remember the past few seasons for this Wichita State team, they were able to get very good production down low out of Quincy Ballard, and they really didn't have a lot of guard play. For Okafor, he was a relatively lowly touted guy, even though he did go to Louisville to begin his career, so a little bit of upside there. I do think that he's going to be able to give Wichita State something pretty solid down low. Isaiah Stafford, he 2 seasons ago was really good for Valparaiso. 17 points per contest, mid-30s 3-point shooter, 1.6 steals per game, missed all of last year due to injury. He has decided that he is going to be going to Southern Illinois. I do think that this is a really good gift for Southern Illinois. It's a bunch that you can tell that they wanted to play up-tempo under Scott Nagy. They didn't necessarily have the personnel to be able to do so last season, and now they're looking to be able to be a little bit more in that mold. It's probably going to cause them to be a little bit rough on defense this season, but I do think that for Southern Illinois, they do have themselves a chance to be able to really tear it up on offense, and they're also bringing in Kuron House, who was over at Jacksonville State this last season, so I like that move for them, and they do have a few guys returning, as we've actually got a few teams from the Mountain West, most notably Illinois State, that have quite a few guys who are returning, and then staying out there in the state of Illinois, you've got Jack Champion. He last season was over at Southern Indiana. He was averaging 4.5 assists, 5.5 points per contest, mid-30s 3-point shooter. He's going to be going to SIU Edwardsville. Edwardsville hasn't necessarily been rambunctious in the transfer portal. They are losing quite a bit from that team that made the NCAA tournament a season ago, but SIUE, it does feel like is taking a lot of strides in the right direction, and I do think that this is a very well-rounded guy that, albeit he's not necessarily a great scorer, that can be able to step in right away and be a really nice glue guy for the team. And Georgetown, they're looking to be able to excel down low, and Vincent Iwachukwu, he comes on over from St. John's. He, last season at St. John's, saw limited minutes because Zuby Ejiofor was amazing, but this is a former top 50 recruit, a guy with some upside. Georgetown was able to do a pretty solid job with regards to their low post play with what they were able to get out of Thomas Sorber. So I look at this move, and I do like it. I was talking about UC Santa Barbara and some of the West Coast schools a little bit earlier. How about them picking up Ada Mahaney? When he was over at St. Mary's 2 seasons ago, he was averaging 14 points per contest. One of the top players out there in the WCC, just really was not a fit over at UConn. You could tell that he's a bit of fish out of water. I think that this is a really good get for UC Santa Barbara. For Santa Barbara, I feel like they've fallen a little bit short the last 2 seasons. I think that this could be exactly what they need to be able to elevate, though. I do feel like with UC Santa Barbara, as more has been expected, they have come up smaller, and when they have low expectations, they come up big, and they also have Mario Little coming over from Utah as well. So I do like what Santa Barbara is doing here in the portal. Not necessarily a ton of moves, but some high-quality moves. You've got Devin Caesar, who last season was over at Old Dominion, averaging about 11.5 points per contest. He has decided that he is going to be going to UMBC. UMBC loses so much of that backcourt from a season ago, and I think that he's going to be a relatively solid add for a UMBC squad that under Jim Ferry, they're going to be really looking to push the tempo. This is going to be a little bit of a culture shift for him because he was playing a little bit more of a slow and more methodical style this past season, but Devin Caesar is a guy that I think is going to be able to step in right away, give this team some relatively good production. He, for his career, only about a 30.5% three-point shooter, but a little bit more of a driver, and also began his career over at Buffalo, so I do think that he's going to be fitting in the mold that they are looking for, and I think that this is going to be a relatively good fit as well. How about Mikey Williams heading on over to Sacramento State? As Shaquille O'Neal, he's actually like the assistant general manager or one of those monikers. He has really been able to pluck this guy out, as I still remember he was a former top 75 recruit. He was just tearing it up at the junior college level 2 seasons ago. Really couldn't get out there on the floor for UCF this last season. Being able to pick up a guy like this, I think is very big for Sacramento State. I think that there's a little bit of upside there, and I do think that moving forward, he's going to be able to give the Sacramento State team just exactly what they need. And then Ore Diaz-Graham, he last season was over at Pittsburgh. He and his brother Guillermo Diaz-Graham are going to be split up because Ore, he has decided that he is going to be going to Oregon State. He did shoot 47.5% from 3-point range, but only averaged about 3 points per contest and 1 rebound per game. At 6'11", he saw limited minutes, but I do think that this is a nice versatility add for an Oregon State team that they're having to deal with the loss of Michael Orta here in the offseason, and so many of those guys that did make them much more solid this past season. And for Oregon State, they've been able to do a nice job of, in my opinion, mixing and matching a little bit in the transfer portal, and I do think that this is going to be very good for them. And what else is good is just taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. And if you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of 2 ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at GNet_81. Keep in mind, letters EM. Naming does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is Vine and Apple Podcast Review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And big thanks once again to our good friend and Paul Fritschner, who does great work over at the Big East Digital Network, Xavier, and so much more. And I'm coming at you guys every single day on this podcast, regular season and off-season, and I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.
If you work in quality control at a candy factory, you know strict safety regulations come with the job. It's why you partner with Grainger. Grainger helps you find the high-quality and compliant products your business needs to inspect, detect, and help correct issues. And the sweetest part is, everyone gets a product that's as safe to eat as it is delicious. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.